Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Daffy's Roundtable. Today, I'm joined by Jeremy of Brassman Reptiles, and we dive into a very cool, very underrated species of snake. I'm talking about Amazon tree boas. Jeremy has been working with Amazon tree boas for a while, and you can tell by the way he speaks and by his knowledge on the species that he's really focused on them. He's learned their behavior, he's learned their habits, and he's doing some really cool things in this space. So I'm very excited to speak to and learn from Jeremy all about Amazon tree boas. There's some really good information in this episode. We talk about their humidity, their heat, how he sets them up, his feeding habits, breeding them, how he raises the babies, and you get a lot of really good information from this episode. But of course, as always, do your own research if you're planning to keep Amazon tree boas. Before we get into the Amazon tree boa talk, allow me to thank Exoterra for sponsoring this podcast and making this episode possible. Exoterra makes quality products for our pet reptiles to make them feel at home. And if you're keeping Amazon tree boas, you're going to need that new Exoterra humidifier. Make sure you go pick one up. Also, before we get into the talk, if you're listening to this on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever else you listen to this podcast, I would really appreciate a subscribe or a follow, comments and likes, everything, all kinds of engagement help, and I really appreciate it. Okay, without further ado, everybody please help me welcome Jeremy of Brassman Reptiles. Jeremy, hello.
What's going on, Fadi? It's good to see you, man.
It's good to see you too, man. Thank you very much for coming on. How are you doing?
I can't complain, man. It's hot here in North Carolina, but we're doing good.
Yeah, it's hot here in Canada right now too, but like you said, I am not complaining, and I hope it stays hot as long as possible.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess North Carolina gets pretty cold as well.
Yeah, we do get pretty cold. Certainly not Canada cold, but yeah, I mean, we'll get maybe in the 20s and the teens here, so over the winter, so it can get pretty cold, but it's usually pretty short lived. So we do stay pretty warm, all things considered.
Awesome. Just since we're on that topic, before we get into all of the stuff, because I want to hear about how you got into the hobby, and of course, what we're here to talk about, Amazon tree boas. But since we're already on that topic, do you struggle to heat your reptile room or keep your reptile room controlled during the colder months?
Yes, even when I lived in New England, it's such a problem, man. Especially when you don't have a room that's like specifically built for them. You know, you're just kind of like average house insulation or a basement or whatever it might be. So yeah, the cold months, you've got the heat blasting, and even sometimes in the warmer months when the AC is blasting, it can dry out a space. So I've found that every place that I've lived, each room I've had the animals in, there's their own quirks. Each room has their own quirks that you kind of have to navigate and figure out. But the colder months are definitely tough, no matter where I'm at.
Yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even think of like heating too much dries out the enclosures, and obviously you're keeping a species that likes it humid, so that's
exactly
struggle as well. But I'm sure we'll get into that very shortly.
Yeah.
Before we do all that, Jeremy, how did you get started in the hobby, man?
Yeah, so I have a very interesting story. I liked dinosaurs. I don't think anybody else has ever liked dinosaurs but likes snakes. So, you know, I think that's unique. No, as a kid, I really liked dinosaurs. And when I was young, I was probably like maybe 4 or 5 years old. I was at a local pet shop with my mom, a little mom and pop shop. We were buying dog food, and they had Chinese fire-bellied toads. Awesome. And I saw why they're called fire-bellied toads when one jumped up to the front. You just see this bright orange belly, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. And I was like, what is that? And I threw a temper tantrum in the store, and and my mom caved and let me get it. So that kind of started my venture into reptiles. And then I was like enthralled by it, and then a little while later got some green anoles, got some leopard geckos, some bearded dragons, and it took me maybe 6 or 7 years before my mom agreed to let me bring a snake in the house. Nice. And then once she opened that door, it was game on. And by the time I moved out of my parents' house, I had like 150 snakes in the house. It was
wow.
Yeah. She realized she made a mistake real fast.
Yeah. And what kind of snakes were you keeping around then?
It was largely ball pythons, but I had a bunch of different colubrids, Burmese pythons, Dumeril's boas, Macklot's pythons, carpets. I had a little bit of everything. My the blessing and curse with me as a reptile keeper is I like everything that is reptile related. So if you show me a snake, I'm going to be like, whoa, and just be like, I want to keep that, you know. Even I think technically the very first snake I kept, if I really think about it, we had a neighbor a few houses down that had caught some garter snakes.
Nice.
And he gave me a garter snake in a little container, but my mom wouldn't let me bring it in the house, so it had to stay out on the. We had like an enclosed front porch, so it had to stay out on the front porch. That was, she didn't want it in the house, and I was like, okay, that's fine, you know. So I kept it for a little while and then let it go. But I got a snow corn snake. That was my very first snake that was able to come into the house.
Awesome. Okay. That one got the pass.
And then that one got the pass. Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, that animal, because I got it from a Petco, and unfortunately, some of those big box stores, like, animals are not always the healthiest. And so that animal didn't live very long, and I was super bummed out. But we went back to that same mom and pop pet shop, and they had just gotten in some ball pythons. And I was like, oh, okay, you know, maybe python. So I had to get my mom to understand that not all pythons were huge. You know, we an uneducated reptile home, right? So it's like, okay, python. Not every python is massive, right? Yeah. Ball python, 3.5, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot is a monster. You know, very manageable. And once she kind of did her own little bit of research to figure out what it was, she was like, okay, we can do that. So I went to the pet store, and at this time in the pet shops, you were only getting normals. You weren't getting, you know, maybe the occasional yellow belly that slipped through the cracks, but like, it was all normals at the pet shops. And there was this one that was just really bright and just had more of a reduced pattern compared to all the other ones. And I was like, I think that one's really cool. And that was the one. And I had that snake for 18 years, and the only reason she's not alive anymore, she actually got egg bound a few years ago and passed, unfortunately. But so I had her for 18 years, and that was the snake, man. Like, I was, anytime anybody came over to see snakes, like, I was like, this is my snake Apollo, you got to check him out, he's so cool, man. Snake, like, that was it. So but that was really what got me started. And like I said, I just liked everything. So it was, anything with scales was cool to me. So
yeah, it's awesome. It's funny, you went from no snakes in the house to pythons are scary to having Burmese, like
having berms and stuff. Exactly. One of my first berms that I ever got, I had a friend of mine that had gotten in a berm that was just, it was too big. It was just too big for him to handle, and he was like, hey man, do you know somebody that might be able to take this? You know, it's probably like a 15, 16 foot Burmese python. And I knew my mom was going to be like, hell no, absolutely not. So me being clever and witty and willing to deal with consequences at a later date, was like, yeah, I'll find somebody. And then I found somebody, aka me, and was like, yeah, he can't pick it up right now, but I know you need to get it out of your house, so I can bring it here temporarily, and we can, you know, move it to its next place. And then I moved it into the house at night, and my mom the next day, she would get up earlier than me for work. She was a teacher's aide, so she would be up very early, and she would turn on some of the lights in the reptile room that weren't on timers, because she would have to pass through that room. And all I hear is what the there's this giant 16-foot berm. Yeah, literally like 12 hours before it was discovered. It's hard to hide a 15, 16-foot Burmese python in the house, you know. So, but it was a super tame berm, just a big normal berm, and I absolutely loved it. And eventually did find a home for it, because my mom was like, no way in hell is that staying here. But yeah, that was the first berm that ever came into the house. And I, even after it had left, I was like, see, it wasn't that bad.
We should get another one.
Yeah, exactly. Let's get one more. It doesn't have to be 16 foot, but we can get another one.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's very cool. And so moving on from there, you kind of, you know, you've grown up a little bit, you're still in the hobby. Where did you go from there?
So when I was a kid with all the lizards and stuff, I had bred green anoles accidentally. I didn't know I had a pair. I wasn't even 10 years old at the time, so I had no idea what the heck was going on. And then when I got leopard geckos, I was breeding leopard geckos, and I was able to sell them to the local pet shop and to a couple of friends and whatever. So when I got into the snake stuff, I was like, oh, it'd be really cool to try to breed snakes. It seems a little bit more challenging than the leopard geckos. So let's try that. And did the same thing, was able to kind of sell them to the local pet shop, to a couple of friends. And, we're talking normal corn snakes and albino corn snakes, so 20, 30 days. It's not like I'm making bank,
Right. Yeah,
by no means. It wasn't a pied ball python, but so that by the time I became a freshman in high school, I started my first business. It was called J&D Reptiles, stood for Jungle and Desert Reptiles. And, I ran that through high school into my first year of college, and I had somebody who was working with me at the time while I went to college. It was like an hour and a half away from home, so I didn't really have to move very far away.
Where was home at that time? Sorry.
Home was in Massachusetts, Western Massachusetts.
Cool. Okay.
So moved for college, came back basically every weekend, but I had a buddy of mine that was helping me largely at the time and would help during the week with general maintenance and stuff while I was away. And basically shit hit the fan, and that no longer worked, but it cost me a lot, and I basically had to step away and shut things down, which was a huge bummer. But I took some time off after that, finished up my time at college, and came back. I had gotten a teaching gig, and maybe around, I think it was 2016 or 2017, I happened to be at a Tinley expo, and I was at the US Arc auction and was bidding on a snake and won the snake. And Phil, the president of US Arc, I've known for a while, and he knew that I played the trumpet. And cool. So when I won the snake, he said, "Sold, thank you, Brass Man," because he knew I played the trumpet. And cool. The name just stuck. People called me Brass Man like for the entire day the next day. And I was like, oh, it's got a little ring to it.
I like that.
Yeah. And thus Brass Man Reptiles was born. And that's kind of where that came from. Awesome. And so I originally told myself I wasn't going to go haywire. I wasn't going to get hundreds of snakes again. I just wanted a tight little collection. And that lasted a very short period of time before I had hundreds of snakes again.
I'm sure.
Totally got bit by the bug. And then kind of getting towards where I am now, I had the opportunity. I was one of the facility managers at New England Reptile. And that afforded a lot of other opportunities, and I was able to meet a lot of other people, which got me more snakes. And yeah, I was really able to have access to a lot of things I never thought I'd be able to keep. And then when I made the move to North Carolina, I was like, all right, we're taking that full leap of faith to work for myself and do my own thing. And I had a diverse collection again, from ball pythons, colubrids, carpets. I had some Amazon tree boas, but I hadn't dived into them just yet to where I'm at now. And yeah, kind of got settled out here, got myself into the show circuit to kind of get my name around and networked. And of course, it helped being at Nerd. People recognized me from the YouTube and stuff like that, which was a great kind of push to be like, oh yeah, I know who you are. So it kind of helped mitigate that. Well, nobody's going to know you when you go to a new place, so that was very, very helpful. Yeah. Fast forwarding to now, where I've taken Brass Man Reptiles to a bit of a pivoted space where I was largely focusing on ball python projects while experimenting more with Amazon tree boas and realizing that Amazons are really getting more of my attention. I was more intrigued by them. I was more interested genetically what was going on and just in the species as a whole, and made the decision probably about a year and a half ago now to start pivoting to make Amazons more the focus of Brass Man Reptiles. And I don't think people totally know the depth of which the downsize was in general across all species, but ball pythons in particular. When I first moved down here, I had about 250 ball pythons.
Wow.
And I now have maybe 50. Okay. And after this season, that's going to be down to about a dozen. and those dozen will just be my fun little projects that I just enjoy kind of tinkering with. I like what they produce, and that's going to be that. So I can, because I still think ball pythons are great snakes for beginners, and you can get cool colors and patterns. So I still want to be able to offer that for sale, but I don't want to have it take up an entire wall of my reptile room. I'd much rather those be Amazon tree boas. So that has become the direction. So as we're downsizing in those fronts and putting things into cages instead of having giant rack systems all over the place, like I'm moving more Amazons and stuff in. So that's where we're at now. And by the end of the year, I should have basically what the room is supposed to look like once Amazons have officially taken over.
That's awesome. And even then, I'm sure you'll be like, oh, but now I want to do this. And
of course,
reptile room is never over.
Exactly. It'll be a plateau for a short period of time where I'm like, I'm comfortable with this, and now I'm not. So
now I'm not. Time to change it up again.
Yeah, exactly.
So are you keeping anything other than ball pythons and Amazon tree boas?
Yeah, so I still have some carpet pythons. I keep mostly jungles. I have a couple of Darwins and stuff. I have a retic that's just a pet that I produced back in 2017. I have probably 10 or so species of U.S. native colubrids, so like corn snakes, cow kings, Pueblan milks, stuff like that. Cool. Just because going back to when I was a kid, outside of ball pythons, colubrids were what I really spent a lot of time with. So they have a special place in my heart. I just like having them around. They're fun little snakes. And another great family of snakes that make really good beginner pets or intermediate pets for those keepers that are still trying to figure out what they like and don't necessarily want to get caught up in the ball python chaos. So I like colubrids from that standpoint. I have some leopard geckos and gargoyle geckos and crested geckos. Trying to think what else. I'm probably forgetting a couple of things, but yeah, there's still a pretty diverse collection.
That's cool. Yeah. So you haven't completely downsized all the way yet.
No. And I think I probably have about like maybe 40 or 50 colubrids across all the species. Cool. I've got maybe a dozen carpet pythons, and that is down from about 50 animals. So I had about 50 carpet pythons from different species. So that's down to about a dozen, and it'll probably stay there. The leopard geckos, I probably have like 30 or 40 adults, and then cresties and gargs, I have maybe like 4 or 5. I don't have too many of those, but those are the numbers that are pretty much now stable, where I'm like, it's basically one rack of colubrids, right. It's just an ARS rack, and that's comfortable for me. I know personally, because everybody can manage a different number of animals before it's too much. And for me, I know that I can comfortably maintain with everything else that I do in my life. I can comfortably maintain between 200 and 300 animals. And of course there becomes more on that when babies start hatching and stuff like that. But I make sure I make the time in those situations. I know that that's not a full term or a full-time situation. Like that's just going to ebb and flow as the year goes on.
Right.
So that's pretty much my sweet spot. I know with the Amazons, I'm probably halfway to the number I want to be with adult breeder animals.
So you want more?
Yes. Yeah. There are more coming.
Nice.
I'm probably at like around 50 or so animals, like between 40 and 50. And I'd like to be around 75, 80. And then that gives me, the purpose is females don't do great breeding them back to back year wise. So I want to they do really good if you can give them a break. So males are fine. Males will breed every year. No problem. But those females can take a beating. So I wanted to have a group that basically comes down to about 25 or 30 males to about 50 females. This way each year I can have 25 girls go. Do I expect 25 litters every year? No, absolutely not. But I want to have that potential each year and not have to sacrifice that, and still be able to push projects forward. So this gives me some flexibility to say, oh yeah, I can have 3 of these, or I can have 4 of these. It's going to help push a project, and I don't have to like hurt the females. I don't have to put them in a bad situation for my own personal desire,
right.
and I like looking at Amazon, so it satisfies that selfish need. So
Absolutely, and like you said, it keeps the priority is the health of the animals, so you're not overbreeding them or anything like that.
100%. Yeah.
That's very interesting. So with that many, well, I guess first of all, do you, when you're bringing more in, do you opt toward buying babies and raising them yourself, or are you trying to find as many already adults as possible?
So it definitely depends on the situation. I mean, you can readily get imported adults pretty much any time of the year. And that was largely how I started the collection. And I'll say that imported Amazons are still hardier than imported any other Corrales. I've worked with imported emeralds, imported Ruschenbergeride, and annulateds. And the annulateds, I would say, are a close second as far as stability of imports. But Amazons, I'll get an imported Amazon in, and within 3 days, it's taken a frozen thawed mouse. Very simple.
Yeah.
But you've got to dial in your parameters. You've got to get your husbandry parameters correct. Otherwise, whatever bacteria or natural flora and fauna are existing internally within that snake will get out of whack. And then you've got a sick snake, and nobody wants to deal with that. I'm certainly not opposed to buying a baby animal and raising it up, especially if it's something that is really appealing or eye-catching. A lot of the stuff that I've gotten in more recently has been captive bred babies that are maybe around a year old tops. Because also most Amazon guys aren't letting go of brand new babies that are just a couple months old, because they change a lot in that first year. Colors start to develop and colors start to fade and stuff like that. So most guys aren't letting them go for at least 8 months to a year. And I'm okay with that. You want to feed that thing for a year before I get it?
Yeah.
Just put my name on it, so you know who to call when it's ready. So I definitely appreciate that for sure. But yeah, I like watching them grow. I think it's really cool to see how those colors develop, especially on stuff like the calico animals, where, babies, you've got some babies that are really white right off the rip, and then you've got some that have just a couple of white speckles that it just starts to take over as the animal ages. And I think that's a really cool thing to watch. And also informs you of how that animal is going to develop, so you can explain that to the next person, especially if you end up producing more. You can say, hey, this animal doesn't have a lot of spots on it right now, but take a look at its parents. I can show you a couple pictures on the development of this parent. So it's probably going to follow this line. So that's kind of why I'm cool with raising those babies. It gives me more information to be able to pass on to the next person.
That's awesome. That's a very good point, actually. Okay, so since we're kind of talking about those colors and patterns, could you break down what the difference between phases and morphs are in Amazon tree boas?
Yeah, so morph wise, there's a lot of stuff that's not fully understood. So like we know that leopard is a recessive mutation. It's a recessive morph. We know that tiger is an incomplete dominant morph, right? So there's never been a visual super tiger, if that makes sense. If there is one, which is very likely there is, it just looks like a regular tiger. But when you breed it, all of your babies would be tigers, but you wouldn't know until you bred it. So it's a tiger,
Yeah.
Then there is the marble, which is very, very new, very, very uncommon. That appears to be at least a dominant gene, could be incomplete dominant. Nobody's done marble to marble. We haven't had that ability yet. And then phases like the Halloween phase, the garden phase. There are speculations on whether or not those are true morphs. Some people are arguing that it's actually recessive. But a lot of times gardens and Halloweens are kind of pushed to the side for the prettier colored animals. So there's a couple of people that recently that I've seen that are really kind of diving into the garden and Halloween traits, because there is a lot of variation within it. So to try to understand it more, I think over the next maybe 5 or 10 years, we'll get a really good understanding of it. But in the meantime, we've just been calling it a phase because we don't have the full understanding just yet of what's going on. Similarly to red calico stuff, I read on one of the Amazon tree boa Facebook groups, there was a post that was a few years old, so I don't know if it still holds true to what we've discovered now, but talking about true red animals, versus just the average red patterned animal. So like a true patternless red is recessive. And there's a debate on calico being incomplete dominant or recessive. And it's pretty split from everything that I've seen on who sides on which angle.
As usual.
Yeah, of course. I kind of go more towards the incomplete dominant or dominant realm, and the big reason for that was my red calico male Carnage. I bred him to a yellow tiger that was captive bred, but no red animals in the lineage that we were aware of. And the entire litter was red calico animals.
Interesting.
So in my mind, that would almost make it like a super, so incomplete dominant, and that male was a super because everything was red calico.
Yeah.
And while his babies are turning out to be quite white, they're not to the same extreme that he was. So it's very interesting. So I'm intrigued to learn more, especially when red calico animals are still being imported from the wild. It's uncommon to see them come in, but they do come in from time to time. So what's to say that there aren't two different lines or multiple different lines that act differently? So I think all of these things kind of combined has made me more intrigued in Amazons, because we still don't know, because they are still imported quite heavily. Different localities might have different looks. Like there's a couple different looks to the leopard gene, and one look seems to come more out of Suriname than out of Guyana. So it's interesting how localities can potentially impact how these morphs look, and if that will carry on. If I was to take, because I've got a couple of those weird ones from Suriname, so it'd be interesting to take that, breed that into a tiger, make those hets, and then make the tiger leopard, and see the difference between what's already produced that might have originally been from Guyana versus what we're seeing out of Suriname. So there's so many differences,
right? Yeah,
within what exists. So it's but basically, to cut and dry answer the question, the primary difference between morph and phase. Morph is something that we are 100% like, we know this is what it is. It's proven genetic. Phase is like, it can do this. We're still trying to figure it out, but we're just calling it the phase. Some people are starting to drop the word phase and just, oh, that's a garden, or that's a Halloween. So we're starting to see the terminology shift a little bit, and I think as we discover more, we'll kind of be able to decipher more accurately, like garden is a morph or Halloween is a morph. I think that's just going to take some time.
Yeah, very cool. Do people know where they're being, like, you mentioned Guyana or Suriname? Are people keeping track of, like, this line came from Guyana, this line came from Suriname, that kind of thing?
Typically, no. And, you can also argue the point that border is really just a fictitious border. When the trappers are going out to collect these animals. So, it could be a snake that literally just happened across that line, that imaginary line. So for the majority of them, no. One of the nice things for me is I've become good friends with a lot of the guys that are importing. So they'll hit me up and say, hey, Suriname just came in. If you're interested, or if something pops up that they're, hey, we just got this out of Suriname, or we just got this out of Guyana, is this of any interest to you? So I'll kind of mentally keep a note of that. I might write it on an ID card so that I can keep track.
Right.
But then I can also talk to them and say, like, hey, in your experience, when you've gotten these things in, has one particular place given you more funky animals than another? And I if I remember correctly, I don't remember who the importer was, but if I remember the conversation correctly, it seemed that most of the interesting colored Amazons were coming more from the northern range than the southern range. And Amazons have quite a wide range in the wild, but it seemed like more of the northern range animals had a lot more color variation than some of the southern ranged animals. So that was also an interesting thing.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Cool. Thank you for breaking that down, because it is a little confusing when you try to research it and read about it online. And and like you said, people have different opinions, so you kind of get lost in
100%
the translation. Yeah. So so very cool. So what about we talked about earlier, the keeping the humidity up, keeping all that kind of stuff when it's hot, when it's cold. What is the perfect, in your opinion, perfect like Amazon tree boa setup? Like, how would you set up one of yours?
So because I'm working with them in numbers, I have some that are in cages, but I've been toying around with different rack ideas, and just utilizing racks appropriately, because I think racks get a really bad stigma, because we oftentimes, I'm going to pick on ball pythons like I do in every podcast. We see the ball python guys that are now working with racks that are getting more narrow, but we're still keeping the same size ball python in there, but we're shrinking the size of the tub. When back in the day, a CB70 drawer was basically the size of a 20-gallon long fish tank, which was the original standard tank for a ball python. You get a male ball python that goes in a 20-gallon long. It's the same footprint as a CB70 drawer, just without the height, because obviously ball pythons are terrestrial snakes, so they don't need 12 inches of height. But now we're kind of making things more compact and tighter, and we're just trying to fit more animals into a single unit. And I don't totally agree with that. I think the narrower tubs have a place. They're great for young females, first time breeder females. I think that's great, but eventually you're going to get a 3,500 gram ball python that really could use a CB70 tub. So that tangent to say, with Amazons and arboreal snakes, the tub world doesn't really fit in all that well, especially when we're thinking about like, oh, well, you've got a CB70 or a Sterilite tub or a Rubbermaid tub. They make some taller tubs, but we don't really have rack options for that. And they're not a clear tub. It's still got some opaqueness to it. So if you're trying to look at it, you don't really
get
see
to enjoy the snake. Yeah,
exactly. So the cages that I use 18-inch cubes from Black Box Cages, and I think those are perfect, especially for males. Could they use more space? Absolutely. If you can give them a bigger space, they'll certainly use it. And I think that's one of the things I enjoy about them, as opposed to an emerald or something that's just going to sit and perch. And yes, it'll move around and do all those wonderful things too. But you're going to watch an Amazon have a real habitual movement. Like, I can go downstairs at 9 a.m. right when the lights come on. All those animals are perched right under the heat panel, just basking for the morning. And then they go down into the cork bark right after that, after they've kind of gotten their heat in for the day. And then right before the lights go out, they start to move into this tube that I have kind of elevated. That's a warm tube. And they'll sit in there. And that's just kind of like how they kind of get that little extra burst of heat that they don't need to be right under the heat panel, but they get that little bit of warmth, and then that kind of gets them started to be able to start cruising for their night. And you could watch this habitual movement all the way through. As soon as I got them into cages, it was like instantaneous, and I was like, whoa, this is actually really cool. Like, you're utilizing this whole space. So I could guarantee you'd see, if you put them in something like what's behind me, this 4x2x4, you'd see them do the same thing. So they will utilize the space. And I think that's one of the coolest parts about them. If you give them a big enclosure, they're going to use it. But regardless, they're going to use every element of the enclosure. So the racks that I've been working with, I started using the extra large Cambro tubs. And Cambro tubs are the food storage tubs. If you're into catering or stuff like that, it's a polycarbonate tub. So it's clear. It holds heat really, really well, and doesn't crack as easily as like a Sterilite or a Rubbermaid could. So you can easily drill for air holes and stuff like that. And the extra large tubs are 26 by 18 by 15. So it's almost if you took an 18-inch cube and just squished it down 3 inches and pushed it back. So it's very similar floor space. And again, I'm using elevated hides, and then cork bark platforms. So they're getting a little bit more square footage than just what's on the base of the enclosure. And I think that gives them a decent amount of space. Now, obviously, if you get a monster 6-7 foot Amazon, you're probably going to want to put it in something a little bit bigger. But your average 5 foot Amazon works perfect in something like that. And then it was a matter of figuring out how to work the humidity appropriately. So I worked on designing a rack with Reptile Basics for the Cambro tubs, and what I wanted to include was finding a way to integrate a misting system. So this way, and you don't have to worry about, okay, I got to open this drawer, next one, because that's tiring. Your hand hurts. Even if you get one of those like 2-gallon mist things, like you're like, gee, if you have any number of snakes, you're going through a lot. And even if you have a hose that with a mist nozzle on, it's still a lot. So I was like, a mist system would be really cool, but integrating that into a rack system, really, you don't really ever think of. So knowing Amazons can tolerate a bit drier than some of the other Corrales, they can have a pretty forgiving range of humidity and temperature. So they don't need a daily spray. They'll be fine if you do that. That's totally fine. But with a mist system, I can comfortably say, okay, I want this to spray 45 seconds every other day. That's going to be really great for the humidity. And maybe if I know that my room gets drier during the cooler months, then maybe I make it every day, but it's a lot easier to go press that on a button and take care of 50 enclosures than it is, oh crap, I gotta go down to the, I can't go on vacation, because I gotta spray these things. Every day. Yeah. So we designed a rack system, for them with an integrated misting system. And basically, if you think about a rodent rack, like from Freedom Breeder or something, they have the watering nipples that come through the back and the tub just kind of slides over them. So that's exactly what we did for this mist system for the cages. So we put the mist nozzle a foot from the bottom, and it sits inside the back wall. So you put your mark for the nozzle on the back of the tub, you drill it out, and then it's got these shims along the side, so the tub slides straight in, and it goes right into where the mist nozzle is, and that's awesome. Absolutely perfect. The one caveat is if you're utilizing a mist system that doesn't have a way for pressure to be removed when the system shuts off, the bottom nozzles will leak, or they'll just drip through. So those bottom enclosures you have to pay a little bit more attention to if you don't have some kind of pressure release system. So I know like the Mist King systems have what they call the zip drip valve. And that will take care of it. You're good with that. If you don't have that, then you deal with the drip, and it's not the end of the world by any means, right. But you do have to pay attention to those lower enclosures so they don't flood out or get nasty or anything like that.
And it's also emptying the mister more frequently now as well.
Yes, exactly. You have to
pay attention to filling it up. Yeah, I've dealt with a similar situation. Yeah.
So there's still, it's not perfect, but it takes a huge load off. Like for me, again, I work as a musician, so I'm on the road a couple days a week. So to be able to have some kind of peace of mind to say, hey, they're going to be taken care of. I don't have to call somebody now to say, hey man, on Saturday, could you just run by my place and grab the hose and just spray all these Amazons for me? Here's $100. Thanks for your time. It's taken care of. And it's like, is it, if an animal's going into shed, I know I'm not going to have to worry about a dry shed or something because I was away for 2 days right before the animal started shedding, it's going to get that humidity boost. And then the other element of the rack is most racks have either back heat or belly heat, right? This has side back heat. So it's going down the back of the, so it's going down the back end of one of the side walls instead of along the back. And the reason for that, I use these racks mostly for my females. So the idea for it was in these tubs, I have 2 corrugated plastic tubes that I have kind of elevated from the bottom, and they act as their arboreal hides. Right. So I've got a warm hide and a cool hide. And the benefit of this is when females are gravid, they're heat seeking. They need to be warm to help those babies develop. And I've watched over multiple iterations of breeding them. If there's a heat panel, they're going to press themselves right up against the heat panel to get as warm as possible. If it's back heat, they're going to press themselves as close up to the back as possible. With this side heat, it goes right along the same space where I have the tube. So I make that tube a little bit longer, and the heat it's just a 7-inch strip of heat tape, but that heat radiates along this food storage tub that's designed to hold heat better.
Right.
So it sits and it's nice and tight up against the PVC, which also allows the heat to radiate. So they can either sit on top of that tube or they can go rest inside of that tube and still get that same amount of heat because it's just radiating over. So the trick there is put the probe for your heat panel on that side. Doesn't have to go inside the tub, but on that side of the tub that's with the heat tape. So if you need to bump up your heat to say 88 degrees for your gravid females, if you get that probe right there on that 88 degrees on the side of the tub, that's just radiating right into where your females are going to be. And right. You can dial that in really, really specifically. So I've got a couple of girls that are currently gravid right now nice. In this setup, and just watching them just kind of sit, like they don't look stressed. They don't look like, oh, I need all the heat I can get, because I hated witnessing that. You know, like, so now it's just like, okay, I can stretch out. I can press my belly here, but I don't have to be like, oh God, I need the warmth, you know? So this has been like the perfect setup for those gravid females. And I'm so stoked to see them utilizing it how I thought they would. And I'm excited to see the results from that as well. Because you think about a female full of babies having to push her body and contort her body into such a weird place and form. What's that doing to the babies in there? Like those poor guys are in there like, help, help, you know,
what's happening?
So, yeah, exactly. Why is my tail's all the way bent and crooked over there now? You know, like, so now we've given the females that chance to really just kind of spread out and have that more flexibility and be more comfortable, which in turn, ideally, makes it that much more comfortable for the babies inside as well as they continue to develop.
Yeah, it's really cool to think that, you know, you created this because you have put so much focus into, like, it really shows how focusing on a species and really learning the species tailors the care very differently to just a random person that, you know, has one Amazon tree boa and it's kind of like, I'm going to throw it in the tank over. Like you've kind of dialing in very specific things based on their behavior, which is awesome to see. That's
I appreciate it, man. Yeah, and I think that the last element that I'm working on including in the tubs, which I didn't, or in the rack, which I didn't originally plan when I met with Rich, but it was getting some kind of lighting in there as well. So the you know, it's LED tape lights.
Have you seen the focus cubes?
I have seen the focus cubes. Yeah, I think those are really cool. Yeah. So I've been toying with like LED tape light kind of on the back of the top of the back wall. Because they don't need a whole lot of light. But they still appreciate a photo period. So to be able to give them some kind of photo period as well. So I've been tinkering around with a couple of ideas on how to integrate that into it. Because if I can do that, then I can also start introducing plants. Even something as simple as a pothos, you know, that grows well even in low light. You know, it doesn't need to be a whole rainforest, but some extra element of like, hey, now we're looking at cleaner air inside that tub. You know, we're looking at like another hiding spot for that animal, whether it be in the pothos when it starts to grow more or just behind the pot, you know, that it sits in. So that's been my whole thing, is like, let's understanding the behavior, like paying so much attention over the last 7 or so years on their behavior and how they move in different setups, from a basic rack to a more focused rack or cage. Let's utilize as much of their brain as possible so that, you know, it's, again, going back to the thought of ball pythons in small racks, you know, like how can we utilize the space to, you know, because obviously we're not doing 3x2x3 cages for every single Amazon. It'd be wonderful, but economically, for what I'm trying to execute, it doesn't work. Right. So how do we make it work in a way that still benefits the animal and gives the animal everything that it needs, while still allowing it to be economically savvy, you know, and work well. And I think we're starting to get to that point. And I think there are people that are experimenting with it. You know, like I've seen people in the past that will take the Freedom Breeder 4-foot drawer racks and they'll use those for a ball python, because it's basically a 4x2 cage. You just don't have the height.
Right.
but that's a big floor space for a single ball python. So I think there's ways, if we start looking at things from that the animal first standpoint, where we can still be economical, right, but just do right by the animals at the end of the day. I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you mentioned with the ball pythons, a lot of these racks it's dark, so
Mm-hmm.
you can't see in, the animal can't see out. They have one high, but you've tackled it in a different way where you have a mister, so you're taking care of humidity. They're clear
Yeah.
tubs, so you can see in, they can see out. They don't feel like they're in total darkness, and you're giving them different hide options where they can move around and they have this. So no, it's almost like you're putting cages onto like a shelving unit more than calling it a
Yes.
rack, like what people are imagining when you're saying rack, which
Yeah.
is very, very cool.
100%. I
Very cool.
appreciate it, man. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Yeah. So okay, so, and then as well as you were kind of talking about all that, you said they're Amazon tree boas are very hardy in terms of having a little bit more of a dry period or a little bit wetter
Mm-hmm.
or temperature shifts. Is there too humid or too wet? Can that be a problem if somebody's like running misters multiple times a day and it's very humid? Or like, have you ever considered a fogger? Or like, yeah, talk to me about their humidity a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. So they definitely do great in that moderate, so like 50 to 70% humidity range. So the thing, when we start talking about animals that want humidity or that exist in places that are humid, I think the one thing that we really forget to think about in those instances is what that environment really is like, right? So a lot of times we think about, even in the rack systems that I have set up, those animals that are getting some of that excess drip from the rack, right? That enclosure has a greater potential for bacteria or mold or something to grow and develop because it's more wet and soggy and dank, and there's nowhere for the water to really go. So
Right.
that's something to take into consideration. So an animal can certainly be too wet. Then you start dealing with risks of scale rot or respiratory infections if there's mold that starts to develop and stuff like that. So that's definitely a concern and something that you need to pay attention to. So a fogger, especially if you've just got one or two cages, those ZooMed Reptifoggers and some of the other foggers that are out there, great. Absolutely
Brand new
wonderful to help
humidifier from
increase.
Exoterra. Sorry, I had
There
to
you
throw
go.
that
No,
in
no, you're good. You're good.
there.
Like those work great, and those are a really great way to increase the humidity. And the thing that I like with foggers, they can they can help bump your humidity without creating oversaturation in the bedding. Right. And everything like that. So those are a really great tool as well. So yeah, it's definitely really about just paying attention to that and thinking about, like, look at the amphibian guys, the dart frog guys, drainage layer, and like the water flows through all these different levels of soil and clay rock and all these things. That's more closer. More closer. English. Sheesh. That's more closely replicating what's happening in the wild. There's some element of drainage going through. You think about right along a riverbank, there's all these different layers of clay and soil, and then it's got the water has to navigate through tree roots and all these things. There's so much that's going on in there versus this little 2.5-inch layer of cocoa that you put, on the bottom of an enclosure with nowhere for water to go. Water that just sits stagnant where animals are defecating. Bacteria is growing. It harbors nastiness, and while it is true, animals are not sterile beings. It's not just a coffee mug you can wash and put on the shelf and be like, it's clean, it's good. Like,
Right.
Talking about a living creature here, it's going to the bathroom and doing all these things. It's introducing bacteria into a space. Even if you're utilizing a more bioactive setup and you have a cleanup crew, the cleanup crew doesn't wipe it clean.
Yeah.
You're not going to put isopods in there.
The size of the snake poop versus how much an isopod can eat. And yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. So taking all those things into consideration. So again, humidity levels on the Amazons, they want to be in that moderate range. They definitely have a rainy season, of course, being in that region. So in those instances, utilizing like the mist system to say, okay, well, I have you misting 45 seconds every other day. Now I'm going to go 30 seconds every day, right. And just seeing something more consistent. Doesn't have to generate a higher volume of water per se, or a much higher volume of water. It just has to be like, okay, there's more. These animals are very tactile. They're touch driven. So when they start getting hit by raindrops or water, oh, something's happening. It
Right.
triggers something. So that, along with food cycling, obviously the rainy season provides more food for their prey, so they're going to have a more abundance of prey. So you can start to utilize these different natural environmental factors to give your animals these cycles normally.
Fascinating, fascinating. The more you talk, the more questions I have. So, but
No,
before
it's
that,
good, man.
I love it. So before that, I'm glad you brought up the dart frog thing, because there's a saying in the dart frog world where it's like, they like it humid, not wet. So like, you don't want it saturated, you don't want it wet, you want it humid, which is like the ambient humidity, not how wet the
Yes.
substrate is. And then you said cocoa. Do you keep your English Amazon tree boas? Right. I just did the same thing. Do you keep your Amazon tree boas on cocoa as well?
So I keep them on Reptichip, cocoa husk. I don't use the cocoa fiber or cocoa coir, but yeah, I think the Reptichip stuff is perfect for them, because it can dry out and rehydrate very quickly and efficiently.
Very cool. Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so another thing, I'm just tacking on to what your past conversations and what you're saying, because this is all very fascinating. You brought up the rainy season and food cycling and all that. Maybe let's touch on breeding really quickly. When is I guess my first question is it a rainy season, and how do I phrase this question? Is it something you're controlling, or are you replicating when it's a rainy season in their natural environment? Like, are you triggering it whenever you want, or are you following their natural cycle?
So the interesting thing for me personally, now that I have the misting systems, I might try to manipulate things a little bit more when it comes to the rainy season. But how I've been doing it before is I'll start to, usually Amazons are like early year breeders. From everything that I've seen, like people start pairing like between that January, February, March, and into April. And that typically seems to be when females start to develop follicles. The last few years for me, like I've noticed all my girls start developing follicles like mid-March into April. And that's without, I'm not manipulating temperatures. I might be boosting food a little bit. Instead of feeding a larger prey item, I might be doing 2 smaller prey items.
Interesting.
But I'm not doing much demanding manipulation on their parameters during that time. What I am doing is I'm watching the individual animal's behavior. And again, I think I might try to manipulate environmental factors a little bit more now that I have the misting system ability in there. But what I have done is really just pay attention to the females. So usually I'm going through, again, with a large collection of animals, I'm down there every day, but I'm going through at least once a week and actually spending a bit of time with each animal, right? So it might just be as simple as like, I want to take a picture of you in the sunlight, like it's not necessarily like I've got to look under every scale to see everything that's going on. It's not anything like that, but I want to take this animal out. I'm enjoying this animal. And, even if it's just a little 5-minute handling session, I want to have hands on my animals, so first off, I'm paying attention to where they're sitting in the enclosure. If they're cooler seeking, just like we see with a lot of other reptile species, it typically means with females, they might be starting to produce follicles. Outside of that, because Amazons are typically a more slender snake species, if that lower third of the body is starting to look a little plump, that's another indicator. So that's what I start looking for more. And if I notice that their food response is way more aggressive than normal, that's another indicator that I'm like, okay, well, you're wanting calories, which means your body is doing something different than it's not used to. So I don't manipulate temperatures. There's a natural ambient temperature shift in the room that they're in, but it's no more than 5 degrees. So it's not a massive drop. But because I'm putting hands on those animals, if I'm noticing that behavior is different, or if I'm noticing they might be a little larger on that lower end, as I'm putting females back into enclosures, I'm palpating. I'm checking to see if there's follicles. And if I notice follicular growth, I'm going to make a note. on the enclosure, and I'm going to increase food a little bit. I'm also going to I'm going to start spraying them just a little bit more, making sure that they're getting that humidity, they're drinking. I think hydration, especially with arboreal species, is something that doesn't get talked about quite enough, and ensuring that those animals have enough water in their body to do what it is they need to do. And that includes going to the bathroom. Constipation is largely talked about in the arboreal world, and a lot of that plays into hydration. And a simple little mist from a hand sprayer is not always what they need. Sometimes they need heavier rain like water to hit them, to get them into that mode of I need to drink now. But yeah, so breeding wise, I'm not doing anything special. I'm just paying attention and listening to what the animals are saying and doing at that point. So and case in point to that, I had females start to develop follicles late in the year last year, like in August. Randomly. I didn't do anything with temperatures or anything. And bred and produced babies in January.
That's awesome.
So they were further along in follicular development. It was I wasn't thinking about paying attention to that. And they were a couple of larger females, so I didn't see as much of a swell. But they were very far along, a couple of breedings in, a couple of locks in, and we were right at like 120 days, bam, babies. And I was like, oh, that's crap, awesome. Like that's awesome. So again, just going back to listening to the animals, but that was a realization for me, especially with bigger females, to really pay attention when behavior might be changing, when you can't necessarily see a physical swell and you're not necessarily seeing them cold seek quite as much. Maybe they're just hanging in the cold tube versus going down on the ground, away from the heat. So yeah, those little cues, and each individual animal is different. So it's right. While the behavior setup might be the same, cold seeking for one animal might be being on the ground. For another, it might be being on the cold hide. So you have to pay attention to those things as well. So it does take a bit more attention to detail in those moments for sure.
Yeah, it's awesome. And those females you were just talking about that you started seeing follicles in August, is it when you see the follicles, that's when you introduce the male?
Yeah. So I think I'll probably start to work with manipulating environmental factors now that I have the setup to be able to do so. But I'm not sold on doing that, because the animals have really been able to tell me exactly what they want to do or what their body is telling them to do whenever it's being told to do so. So if I can manipulate that by food cycling and stuff that doesn't take a lot of or doesn't put a lot of pressure onto the environmental factors, then great. I'd love to not, stress them out potentially. But if that means an animal is just going to start producing follicles in August, then okay. I'm not opposed by that. They're gonna cycle whenever their body starts producing those hormones to cycle. So at that point, it's just praying to God that a male is willing to breed.
yeah, that's fascinating. Cool. Okay, so maybe let's touch on diet for a second. Is there anything specific that you feed? I'm assuming rats. I'm assuming.
Yeah. So largely it's mice. On most of them. Some of my bigger animals, I'm definitely doing like rat crawlers, but I'll also throw in the occasional quail. I do have a small stock of birds specifically for that, but a lot of their diet seems more rodent based, and they appear to do really well on that, and I don't see a need to necessarily deviate too much from that. Yes, in the wild, they're going to eat rodents, they're going to eat birds, they're going to eat maybe even amphibians and stuff like that. And so maybe like 3 weeks out of the month, they're getting mice. The next week, I'm going to give them a quail and change it up a little bit.
Yeah. And you are feeding weekly. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Yeah. I'm feeding weekly. If during the off season, I might pull back, I might skip a week. On the more slender animals, they've got a fast metabolism in comparison to a lot of the other corralis. So I think weekly, every 10 days at the most is good for them. If you skip a week, it's not the end of the world. If you miss a week, it's not the end of the world. And I think that goes across multiple species, really. Right. Yeah. Like they don't need every week. Like it's a good guideline, but it's not 100% necessary. They're not. The snakes don't have a calendar. Yes. That's like it's Wednesday.
Come on, I'm waiting,
buddy. Yeah, exactly. But they do become creatures of habit. They 100% do become creatures of habit, and they know. Especially if you're using frozen thawed rodents, or even if you're using live rodents, when they get that smell, they know, Sure. So if you're doing every week, they're going to know, okay, it's about that time. I'm getting hungry again. And you'll notice those behaviors right when you go to open an enclosure. They're coming out like, yes. What's up?
Yeah. I'm ready.
Yeah. Put that heat signature over here, buddy. See what happens.
Yeah. Fascinating. And when you have babies, is it the same thing? Do you have to do anything special to get babies eating? I've heard lizards. I don't know if this is if this is something you've had to experience or deal with.
So with Amazons, I've gotten really lucky. Every Amazon litter that I've produced, babies have taken frozen thawed pinky mice or fuzzy mice right off the rip. Awesome. The trick has been right before you go to offer it to them, put the rodent in really, really hot water to boost the body temp, and then put it in front of them and they'll go for it. I'll usually start, unless it's a really small baby, on a fuzzy mouse. Something about that bit of size with that heat signature gets them locked in. Which I forgot who had told me that, but because I was struggling, the first litter I had ever produced, I was struggling getting them to take pinkies. And I'm like, this thing can't eat much bigger than a pinky. Like, it's a very small snake. Like, try a fuzzy. I'm like, there's no way in hell. And bam, fuzzies. It was literally the trick. So I don't know what it is, but I shouldn't have been as shocked as I was having bred carpet pythons for a long time. Baby carpets, I'll start them on rat pinkies. That's a notably larger prey item, Wow, but I think the other trick with them is they want to be humid. They want to be moist. Moisture is seriously important for more so than adults. Yes, they dehydrate super quickly. So usually when I'm setting up babies, I set them up on paper with some sphagnum moss. Babies really crave that extra boost in the humidity. So I'll make sure that there's some extra moss and stuff in there that they can even just go rest in and sit in. And I noticed that they'll even do that more so than sit on some kind of perch, which is very interesting. But outside of that, I'm not really doing anything too special for them. But so boosting the humidity and a larger prey item than you might think. And that's what I was saying with the carpet pythons. One of the other things I learned with doing that was, we're very much trained as reptile keepers and breeders. You breed the animal, you get your baby, let the baby go through a shed, set it up in its bin, and then you can feed it.
Yeah.
While that does work for a lot of species, it's not the only way to go about it. I don't think there's anything wrong with offering a prey item once you have an animal set up and it's gone through its shed. Obviously, that would make sense for it to be the time for it to want to eat. It's okay to go a little bit of time after that first shed before you offer them food. So you think about the yolk that they're absorbing is going to kind of get them through that first week to 10 days. But then it's not like a mouse magically wanders in front of them after their first shed. They have to start hunting. Yeah, they have to start actually going to hunt. So if you notice whenever you're opening your baby bin that the animal's just kind of perched, sitting, chilling, like it's not actively moving around, sure, you can offer it a prey item. If it doesn't take it, don't stress. Come back maybe a different time of day. Obviously they're nocturnal snakes. So maybe come right when the lights go off, give it 5 or 10 minutes, and then go to offer it. If you happen to notice your nocturnal snake being very active during the day, it might be looking for food because
Right.
now it's getting hungry. So a trick with carpet pythons that you tweak for something like an Amazon tree boa, but once they shed, I'll go 2, sometimes 3 weeks before I offer them a prey item after that first shed, which seems like an incredible amount of time, a month before getting a prey item. But if you put them in the space of, I need to find food, you
Now.
need that click to go off, you're going to have a higher success rate getting them to feed. So, of course, offer it earlier. If they take it, wonderful. You're off to the races. If a baby is giving you a little bit of trouble, it's okay to step away and let that animal get a little hungry. Amazons is the same thing. So I might offer, a day after I get them set up individually. If they don't take it, I'm not stressing it. I'll give them 4 or 5 days and then come back, because usually after an extra week and a half,
now
they start cruising. They're like, I need something, man. Give me something. And a lot of people might look at that and be like, oh, well, you're forcing the animal into a mode of starvation. And again, we have to look at what these animals are doing in the wild. Nobody's there to tell the mouse, go get eaten,
and not
like
just a mouse, the right size mouse.
The right size mouse. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Imagine being that tiny pencil-sized Amazon tree boa and an adult mouse comes by right after you shed. You might kill it, but you're not eating it, buddy.
You're not eating it. Yeah, 100%.
So it takes a little bit more brain power, to start thinking like that. And it takes a willingness to understand the wild and understand that we're dealing with creatures that are in a space of almost thriving at some level of neglect. Like, that seems weird to say, but if you think about what these animals go through normally in the wild trying to find food, again, it's not right there when you want it.
Right.
They have to actively search. If I'm not hungry, I'm not going to eat.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that. I'm
not going to waste the energy to go hunting when you're not hungry, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And as people, okay, I might go stop at Dunkin' Donuts because it's on my way to the highway. But, if I'm not hungry, I'm typically not going to eat,
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
But, so I think we need to take that mentality and that approach to a lot of other species. For me, working with so many different species, I've been able to kind of see how those impact feeding and the success of offspring as they continue to grow. If you get an animal that right off the rip, has it shed, you set it up, you offer it food, and it takes it, wonderful. Like, not discrediting that whatsoever. That's how I've worked the majority of my career in reptiles. No qualms on that whatsoever. But when you can start to change your thinking and say, okay, well, it's not the end of the world if that snake doesn't eat in 17 days. It's fine. Now that animal wants food. Yeah. It hasn't wanted food. Now it wants it. So now I can give it food, and that's exactly all it needs to get it started. And the Amazons are really similar to carpets in that way, where once they're on food, they're going. They're off to the races, man, and you're good to go. So it's like, if I got to deal with 2 weeks of a little anxiety to make sure that thing's going to want to eat, cool, because I never have to worry about it again.
That is awesome. It's very interesting. Actually, my first time hearing people comparing Amazon to carpets, but I like that. I have quite a few carpets, so it'll be an easy transition. That's cool. Okay, cool.
Yeah. And it's like they're certainly very different snakes for sure, But when you think about that, like arboreal snake lifestyle, there's a lot of those similarities there that you can start kind of piecing together.
Very cool. Very cool. I think a common thing that, I don't know if you want to call it a myth or, a stereotype for Amazon tree boas is that they're very feisty, nippy, all of that kind of stuff. Do you recommend more of keeping them as a hands-off snake if people don't handle them? Or what's your opinion on that? Is it true or, yeah?
So with 50 Amazons, I have 3 that want me dead regardless of the day or the time or whatever. That includes imports and captive animals.
Awesome.
I have 1 captive bred female that is 5 years old. She's wonderful. absolutely wants me dead all the time. Doesn't care. I have 2 imports that are the same way. And I'm like, oh, you're an import. I can understand you not trusting people. Cool, fine.
Yeah.
All of my others, there might be the initial when I go into the enclosure, they're like, what the hell? That startle. Yeah, that come right up to you to be like, what are you doing? And I might get a pop shot once in a while from one, but largely they're wonderful. I just posted a reel on my Amazon. So I do these periodic reels, another day, another Amazon, and I just highlight another Amazon in the collection. And the one that I just highlighted, this beautiful bicolor female, captive bred female, I went right into her enclosure, picked her right up. No qualms. Yep, that's the one. I went right into her enclosure, picked her right up. Didn't care. And even in the video, I was like, I had my hand right in front of her face, and she came over and she smelled my hand and then just moved right along. She didn't care, didn't go to bite at me. So do I think Amazons enjoy being handled? No.
Yeah. I don't think any of them right. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I think that they can tolerate it more than we give them credit for. And I think it's largely because if I think about holding a ball python, like a pet ball python, I'm sitting back, I'm whatever, chilling. Yeah, I'm chilling with that. And I might move a hand, somebody put something in my face, I might, swat away at it. But I don't, this dog.
You're good.
Yeah. But I'm not thinking anything of it with a ball python or even like a boa constrictor or whatever. Hell, even a retic. If I'm chilling, I've got a big snake out, swat my hand away. The snake doesn't care. It's right. Whatever. Amazons and other arboreal snakes, you do something like that, they're looking at you like you're now enemy number 1. Like, what the hell is your problem? So I put a video on my YouTube, literally titled "Don't Get Bit," and it was like handling tips for Amazons, and it's about utilizing their natural tendencies to your benefit as the handler and the keeper. And one of the most important things, which does work across all species, but arboreal species in particular, is to give them a point to focus on, to go towards. These animals want to climb. They want to be going away from whatever might be stressing them out, and get away. So I don't have a tree boa with me, but if I was holding an Amazon right now and I could put it a little closer to my laptop screen, it would start to go towards my laptop screen to crawl and get away. It's the same thing if I'm holding my Amazon in my reptile room and maybe it turned around at me because I moved my hand too fast. I'm going to turn, get it to focus on something else, and point it to another shelf in a rack system. Am I going to let it go climb onto it? No. But I just want it to start focusing on something else so that I can get back into this handling mode to where it's not going to immediately want to come back and grab me. And I think that's the biggest key to working with them and so many other arboreals, because I've done the same thing with emeralds. I do the same thing with my my Ruschenbergeri and annulateds, and even my carpets.
Emeralds?
I don't keep emeralds now. I have had them in the past. I want to get a couple more. I might, wink, wink, get a couple later this year.
You should. Cool.
Okay. Yeah. Absolutely. I love them. I have Corralis fever as a whole. Cool. Amazons have the focus, but I love all the Corralis for sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think utilizing their natural behaviors to benefit us as far as handling goes, it takes you light years ahead of everybody else. Again, that being said, there's the occasional one that just doesn't want to be messed with. Right. And once you know that, then cool. You're good. You can figure out like, I am using a hook for you, or I don't touch you unless I absolutely have to, kind of thing.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I actually asked you this question on purpose because I have seen that video that you posted, which, by the way, link will be in the description. Go check it out.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I've seen your Instagram where, I've seen other people's and they're always like using a hook or staying away or whatever, but you're holding it and you're talking about the snake. So I was like, he's holding them. He's like, it's possible. So
yeah, man. You know, I brought the last couple of reptile shows that I vended. I don't vend very many. Just my schedule doesn't allow it. But the last couple that I vended, I brought some Amazons with me. I had a couple surplus males that I didn't have a good direction for. So I was like, oh, you know, I think I'll offer them for sale. And all imports, with the exception of one baby. I had them out at shows, and I had people holding them.
Yeah.
And the look on their faces, they're just like, I can't believe I'm holding the snake and it's not biting me. And I have these lights that they come up and over the displays. So I would have people stand in front of that light. So if the animal would maybe turn towards them, I'd be like, okay, hey, we're going to turn, get that animal to look at the light and just kind of push it, you know, like hold your hands close to the light so it looks at it and starts to move.
Right.
And you watch people be like, oh my God, it worked. Like, you know, like I'm not getting bitten, you know, I'm not in danger of being bitten now. I'm like, yeah, you just have to get them to think, okay, I can get away. This is fine. You know, I think about them like they're like cats. Like they're cool. You handle them, you pet them, you do whatever. Once that thing's had enough, wow, and gone. You know, you know,
that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that's funny. And the noise was 10 out of 10 as well.
Yeah. Yes.
It's exactly what cats sound like. I love it. Yeah, no, that's great advice, and it's good to see that people are slowly starting to break all these myths or stereotypes that are becoming common about certain species, because a lot of them 100%. Aren't true. Yeah,
100%, man. And I think for me, that's one of the things that intrigues me about them, and some of the other species like carpets and even blood and short-tail pythons. That's what I didn't mention. I keep Borneo short-tail pythons too. But awesome. A lot of those species get the reputation, you know, blood pythons, call them blood pythons because they make you bleed. And it's like, no,
that's not,
it's not real, you know. But in the 90s, when all the imports were coming in, we kept them like freaking retics. We kept them hot, we kept them wet, and they did not like that. So they made you bleed because they were mad all the time, you know.
Right.
You know, but not because they couldn't be worked with, you know. And carpets the same way. The number of people that come up to me if they see a carpet python on my table and they're like, man, they're so pretty, but they're just so freaking mean. And I'm like, no, it's not. Here. You know, like I had a vendor at a show once, was like holding probably like a 6 or 7 foot coastal carpet, and you could tell they had never held an animal like that before, because they kept thinking anytime its head was coming towards them, like, they were like, and I'm like, you're gonna get bit.
Yeah,
like the animal just wants to climb. It's not showing any form of aggression. It's not giving you any of that. And they're like, no, man, it's gonna bite me. And I was like, give me. You can cut this out if you have to. I was like, give me the fucking snake. and like grabbed it and was like, it's fine, dude. You're over here. Like the thing comes over, puts its head on my arm, and then just slithers away. I'm like, you're over here thinking you're gonna get bit. You're gonna make yourself get bit.
Yeah,
because you're not comfortable.
You're
and like
putting yourself in that position.
Exactly. And it's like, it's okay to not be comfortable holding the snake, you know, but like you can't approach the animal like it's aggressive.
Yeah.
You know, because now you've ruined your own understanding of the animal, but now you've ruined that animal's experience with people.
Right.
You know, and a lot of these species, especially some of these larger growing species, they have memory banks. They will remember these situations, and it's not good for anybody involved, right. You know. Thinking back to my experiences with blood and short-tail pythons, you put a blood and short-tail python in a cage that's too hot, and that thing is just hitting the glass every time you walk by because it's pissed off. Every time it's doing that, it hurts itself, right? When it's hitting the glass, and it's looking at you.
I mean, like, this is your fault.
It's coinciding you with pain and heat and anger.
Right.
So no wonder why you're having a shit experience with the snake.
Yeah,
you know, you've got to figure out how to mitigate those situations. And to the point, we've gotten much better at keeping bloods and short tails and carpets and stuff like that to where we don't really see those things. But it's interesting to see, even with those advancements in the species, those negative stereotypes still exist on to this day. You know, so I love being in a position where I can highlight a species that has those negative connotations and be like, no, that's all a myth, man. You know, it's really all a myth. And I'm grateful to have the audience that I do, the size audience that I do, to be able to really showcase that to a mass of people. Like I think anybody that can showcase it regardless of the audience size is wonderful. But I'm happy to have a platform with enough size to get people in a large quantity to be like, whoa, I didn't know you could do that.
Yeah.
And get those brains moving.
Yeah, exactly the reaction I had. It was like, he's holding it. Like
Yeah.
it's not killing him. Like
Yeah,
this is not,
exactly.
yeah. So
Exactly.
that's fascinating. That's fascinating. Awesome. Okay, one more question and I'll let you go.
No, you're good, man.
Shedding is,
Mhm.
do you ever have issues with shedding? Like we talked about kind of they're able to handle a wide range of humidity, but within that wide range, do you ever have issues with shedding? And if you do, what's your solution, I guess?
Yeah, so definitely, like if I'm quarantining a new Amazon, usually I've got it on paper as a substrate, just in case there might be mites or anything like that. I want to see that.
Right.
Those animals in particular, I would have issues with sheds, just because it's harder to keep the humidity up in such a bland setup.
Right.
Occasionally during those cooler months when humidity is a challenge to kind of keep stable, I get some bad sheds. Easiest way to try to mitigate that is I'll put some kind of mark on an enclosure if I see a snake going into shed, and I'll just spray it a little more consistently as it's going into that shed cycle. If I happen to miss it and the animal's having a bad shed, I'll take it out of whatever enclosure it's in. I'll put it in a 6-quart or a 15-quart Sterilite bin with maybe a half-inch of water. And then I'll put that in an incubator. So I use those old retired Coke fridges from the retail shops and stuff, and just have those fixtured out as incubators. And I have one that's more for my pythons that sits a bit higher in temperature, and one that sits a bit lower in temperature for colubrids. So I'll put it in the colubrid incubator for at most 24 hours, depending on how bad the shed is really stuck. And usually with that, a little manipulation, and you can get the shed right off of it, and it's not too big of a deal. Occasionally, so Amazon skin is interesting because it doesn't wick water up the same way that a lot of other snake sheds do, where like I can put any other snake in that same situation to help it shed, and I can get the skin off with no issue. Sometimes Amazons, especially if like maybe they were sitting low on the enclosure, so the belly scales were nice and humid, but the sides and the back dried out.
Or dried out.
Yeah, so you're like, okay, cool. Well, I don't have to worry about the belly scales because that's annoying to work around. But now I'm like using my thumb and I'm just getting little shreds of the side skin and stuff. So in those instances, I might use a bit more water in the enclosure than a little half-inch. I might do an inch or inch and a half. And here's the little barker right here.
There he is.
And I might let them sit. I might be deliberate in that and let them sit for maybe 2 or 3 hours. So a shorter bit of time, but they're getting more water onto the body faster. And that will usually help that stuck shed on the side and the back. But it's annoying.
Yeah.
It's very annoying. And if that doesn't work, then a cheat code is keep the animal humid in its enclosure. And hey, stop that. Keep the animal in its enclosure. Keep the enclosure as moist as you possibly can. Feed it a little extra. Kind of get it pushed into another shed cycle. So that you can then be on your P's and Q's for your humidity, and it won't have an issue getting that shed off. And then you've pretty much handled the situation there.
Dealt with both sheds in one go.
Yeah, exactly. Because you also have to think about, because the skin is a bit more fragile in comparison to shedding a ball python or some other species of snake. The longer you're sitting there, trying to get the skin up, you're pissing that snake off and stressing it out to God knows when, Yeah, so I'm like, hey man, if I got to mist you a little more intently for a week and a half or 2 weeks, and I got to give you an extra mouse to get you into a shed cycle a little faster, cool.
Yeah.
I'll put you on a diet for a couple weeks after you shed again.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I actually like the reason I asked that is because I have seen you brought it up where like the skin, I didn't know what it was, but like you're right, the skin doesn't wick like other species. Like it almost like
Yeah.
you wet one side and that's the only side
Yeah,
that
that's
stays
it.
wet or
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, it's very
So
interesting
annoying.
yeah, yeah, it really is. That's fascinating. Very cool. Awesome. Jeremy, I thank you very much, man. That's so much
Absolutely.
interesting knowledge and really like I don't know if the right word is commend, but I commend you on the work you're doing with the Amazon tree boas. It's really cool to see someone
Thank you.
focus on a species and like innovating within the space and yeah, it's good job, man. I like round of applause.
Thank you. I really
Yeah.
appreciate it. And I want to give a shout out to some of the knowledge that, I kept Amazons when I was in my early teens. That's why I kept them at first. I
Yeah.
had no idea what I was doing. I had a very bad experience. So I never really moved forward with them. When I was at Nerd, right before I started at Nerd, or right before, yeah, right before I started at Nerd is when I got back into keeping them.
Cool.
And was able to connect with people like Randy Pegues, Keith McPeak, Rory Gresco, and some of the other great Amazon tree boa keepers and breeders in the country. I'm honored to have a platform to really push it and publicize it, but a lot of those guys have been incredibly helpful along the way, and I think the Amazon tree boa community is great in that way because it's so tight knit. There's a very strong willingness to help because we all really love the species and we're excited to see more people start keeping them and get to understand them. So if you've got Amazons, which I know you do now, if you've got Amazons or you're thinking about getting Amazons, it's probably the one time I'll ever recommend a Facebook group.
Okay, hit us. Yeah, please do. Yeah.
Because it's a really great tight knit community, and even you'll find all the keepers in on Instagram. We pretty much share each other's animals all the time because we've all got things that we think are really cool. So yeah, become a part of the Amazon community because it's really tight knit and it really is very, very supportive. And I don't say that lightly because most other Facebook groups I want to light on fire. So
yes. what is the Facebook group called? Sorry.
So there's Amazon tree boa keepers and breeders. I think that's the primary group that I use. Let me make sure that's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
Amazon tree boas. Yep, keepers and breeders. So it looks like this.
Just found it. Just joined it.
Bam,
Cool.
perfect. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep, it's
and
a
that
great
will also
group
be in the
and
description.
bam, there you go. Yeah, and it's a great group and there's people from literally all over the world. Some of the European keepers and breeders post in there as well, and it's really cool to see what they've got going on because they've got some amazing animals in Europe. And yeah, everybody's just excited about Amazons in that group. There's literally, I don't think I've seen any bit or bounce of drama or nonsense in there, and that I appreciate that so much.
yeah, for real, especially for Facebook groups. It seems like that's where everybody goes for the drama.
For the drama.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, I'm bored. Let's go on Facebook.
Yeah, right. Yeah, let's start a fight today.
Exactly. Yeah. No, that's hilarious. That's awesome. Cool. Well, yeah. So Jeremy, thank you very much for coming on, man. I really do appreciate it. Can you told us where to find the Facebook group? Where can people find you? Where can people keep up with you?
Yeah, man. So on all my platforms at Brassman Reptiles, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook. I don't really use my TikTok like that, but you can find me on TikTok. And then at my website, brassmanreptiles.com. I have a whole Amazon tree boa spotlight page on there, and I show some of the animals that I have that are breeder animals and talk a little bit about Amazons there. So just as a reference. So yeah, but Brassman Reptiles everywhere.
Awesome. And all those links, once again, will be in the description, as well as everything we spoke about in the video. Jeremy, once again, thank you very much. And
absolutely. Thank you, Fadi.
Of course. Yeah. And everyone else, thank you for listening. Go get yourself some Amazons. Go learn about some Amazons, and we will see you on the next one.
Yeah, do it.